Good morning. So today I'm going to show you how to create a graph inside of a Google Sheet and then how to export it into a Google document. So we are working on a lab where I'm asking you to, for this example, extra credit, import a graph into our report. As we know from our tests and from other activities we've done in class, our data is not limited to just our data table, but instead we can also show it visually through a graph. So this is one example of how a graph could look on your Google Sheet. And if we zoom out a little bit, we can see that it's not just the data table and then another page. It could be together on one page, all considered data. So we are going to do this as an example. And then you can use the exact same steps to do it on your own report. Here's another example. It's done slightly differently. So you're going to go to Google Classroom and open up the template I've given you, or you can go to New and Google Sheets. This will create a completely blank document or workbook that you can use to create your data table and import your graphs. So I'm going to give it a title, and this is going to be lab number 29, and I might want to write that this is for 5th grade because I'm not in 4th grade, I'm in 5th grade in this video. And now I want to put my actual data table in. So I'm going to look back at my template where I was writing, or my notes that could be next to me on my desk, and I see that I observed paper, desk, foam, and sandpaper over 3 trials plus an average to see the number of washers or force needed to move my fake dog sled over those different surfaces. So I'm going to go back to my Google Sheet and I'm going to put that in. Usually we just do the average in our graphs, so that's really all we need to focus on. And then we need to add whether or not this was a paper or foam or desk or sandpaper, are different surfaces. And now what I'll do is I'll use my results, my data that I collected during my experiment, during my lab, and I'm going to plug that in. So for the paper, it took 2 washers in my experiment. It took 3 washers in the foam. It took 5 for the desk, and it took 8 for the sandpaper. Not bad. The rougher surface, actually, it took 5 for the foam and 3 for the desk. My 2 titles here were mixed up. But we can see that the rougher the surfaces, the higher number of washers were needed than the smoother surfaces. Now to create a graph, I'm going to highlight those cells and I'm going to click Insert, Chart. And this will generate a graph for me already done. I like to also click these 3 buttons and make the chart its own page. That makes this graph a lot bigger and easier to edit. So if I click Edit Chart, I can then go to Customize and edit all these different pieces that I'm going to need to do in order to get the full credit for my graph. So the first thing I'm going to do is click Chart and Axis Titles. And I'm already on Chart Title. It's not just average. It's not the average number of pizzas I ate. It's not the average number of computers I own. It's the average number of washers needed to move a dog sled over different surfaces. Now, if I can't think of a title to give it, I can go back to my data on the chart and write this title, comparing the force needed to move a sled over rough and smooth surfaces. That would have been just as good of a title for this particular lab. Once I've clicked and done the chart title, I'm going to go to horizontal axis. That's the one that goes across at the bottom. So what is my horizontal axis talking about here? I'm looking at the different surfaces: paper, foam, desk, and sandpaper. So the title is going to be different surface types. And now I can see that now there's a title underneath, and I still have paper, foam, desk, and sandpaper labeled on this graph. I'm then also going to click vertical axis title, which I then need to say not just average for my scale, but average number of washers, because that's what I was measuring. I can click out of that, and I'm going to now go to legend. Now the legend, depending on how you create your graph, if I had written my table with the words smooth surface and rough surface as well, then all of my bars would have been smushed together like we see in the example here. And then I have a legend or a key, and I have 4 different colors. And that's okay if you want to do it this way versus this way. So what we're going to do, if you have a legend, the position of it, where do you want that information? Do I want it on the top? Do I want it on the bottom, on the right? And this just shows me that blue means the average. If it was to show the different surface types, then it would say red is paper, blue is foam, etc. Then I'm going to go to my vertical axis piece because I have my scale. And I've decided to count by 2s since my highest number is 8. But I need to make sure that the minimum value is 0. And my maximum value I could leave at 8, or I can go up and make it 10. So now I have a little bit of extra room here. I see that it's at 8, but I could have gone higher. And that's always good to have. Scale factor we're leaving at default, but I could always go by, maybe I wanted to go by millions, maybe I want to include decimals. I like to just keep it at default though. And then I'm going to click grid lines. Our major grid lines are what you see here that's labeled 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, 0. But I'm also going to add a minor grid line, and you're going to make sure that you add 1 minor grid line. So now it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If I were to add more grid lines, that just means that now I'm going in between 0 and 2 4 or 5 times or 10 times. So the numbers are much more precise. If my average was very detailed, I might want more lines in between. But since they're not, I just want 1 in between. And that is your graph. You have a title, you have labeled axes, you also have specified which bar is which, you have a numbered scale, you have more lines to show me exactly what is in between those 2 numbers, and you have a legend that made sense. So that's how you create a graph in Google Sheets. But how do I get this graph or this chart into my lab report? I'm going to go underneath my data table. When I click there, I'm going to click enter to give it a space. And then I'm going to click insert and chart. Then I'm going to click the words from sheets. And this is going to bring up all of my different Excel spreadsheets. Well, not Excel, Google Sheets. I'm going to click the one I was just working with, Lab 29, 5. And this is the only graph I have in that sheet. So I'm going to click it and click the word import, which is right here in blue. And now here's the graph I just made. Here's my legend or my key, my 4 bars, my numbers, my averages, my titles. It's all there, ready to go. Now, obviously this template right now is my teacher guide, and I have 3 or 4 graphs here. You only need 1. There's no reason to do more than 1. There's also really no reason why you need to show me all of the results, because this graph here that I tried to make is really confusing. At the bottom, it shows all 4 surfaces average, then their trial 1, then their trial 2, then their trial 3. and you have to play around with how the data chart is formatted over here to the side in order to get the results you want, like all of the paper numbers and then all of the foam and all of the desk and all of the sandpaper. So this is not really the best way to show your data to a person who is reading your report or looking at your data on a poster. Showing just the average, even if it looked like this with 4 colors, is much easier to understand and interpret than seeing 12 different colored bars on a report. Once you're done with the entire report, you'll obviously click the button that shows up next to share that for you says turn in. And that's perfectly fine. You don't need to submit anything else separately, just adding the graph here and clicking turn in. Okay? If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Bye, guys.